We interrupt this college basketball Saturday to bring you the latest installment of No Sleep Teal right here on the Reier on YouTube channel. Travis Reier alongside my co-host Evan Reier. Evan, no shortage of topics this time around as the
Yeah.
Jacksonville Jaguars in the last few days have made what, at least in these parts, and of course we're at Party Girl again, Party Girl Avondale, where you can find the best chicken salad, the best sausage, Kaneka sausage and cheddar biscuits. A lot of great stuff here at Party Girl. But here in Duval, I would say it qualified at least as semi-seismic, this news of the last few days.
Yeah, 0 to 100, it was it was real quiet there for a bit. And we knew that it was going to ramp up. You get in the March and the free agency window starts coming in hot and, combine's already gone behind us. But yeah, that was kind of a bit of a surprise, with the release of Evan Ingram, the trade of Christian Kirk, and the retirement of Mitch Morse. Three exits in three different fashions, which is
They say they come in threes.
yeah. Well, and there's a couple other guys gone, right? Like Josh Reynolds and Devin
And
Duvernay.
we'll have a separate show for the
Yeah,
Josh
to
Reynolds. I mean, obviously.
pay our respects. Ronald Darby as well, right? He's out of there. But no, it's while it is interesting, it's also exciting to think about the possibilities of what they're going to do from here. I will say, was it 2 weeks ago? I said that I think Christian Kirk will be on the roster, so that's pretty funny to look like a complete dumbass on that one. But that's how it goes sometimes.
Let
You
me
know,
ask you this. Did you think it would be Kirk or Ingram
I
in
thought it
terms
was.
of the
I didn't
two?
think both were going to be gone. I
That's
thought,
what I'm asking. Yeah.
yeah, I thought for sure that Trevor, whether that was due to his own influence, his
Because
own
they're both
desire,
his guys. I mean,
yeah, the guys
Christian is
that
often
he
associated with Trevor, but Evan too.
Evan. I mean, he the post that Trevor put up about Evan Ingram seemed very heartfelt, seemed very genuine. Veteran guys that especially as he was getting past kind of the rocky start of the Urban Meyer era. Guys that I think were pretty important to him in terms of probably just developing connections, teaching, all that different stuff. But at the end of the day, there's a whole new setup. You can't just carry, the guys of the past just because the quarterback might want them. Obviously, we don't know the actual reasons and, why exactly they're deciding to do this. But it's yeah, we're going to be looking at a pretty different wide receiver group next year.
There's been
So
angst here locally in that Kirk went to a division rival in the
yeah,
Houston Texans. What are your thoughts on that? Where do you sit with that? Or if you're James Gladstone and look, you're going to release the guy anyway, even if it is the Houston Texans, you get a pick. It's a seventh round pick, as we know. But it's better than just cutting him. And then he could have ended up with the Texans anyway.
yeah, that's the thing is like there's you have no leverage. There is no point in not just taking whatever resources you can get. And as we've talked about a lot recently, Gladstone is a guy who wants a lot of draft picks. That's how the Rams operated. While this is a 2026 seventh round pick, so it's kind of like all right, like it's the lowest amount of return you could possibly ask for, really. Still, I mean, I don't mind it at all. If the Texans were in greater need of someone like Kirk, I would be maybe a little bit more worried. But I mean, I don't really see him being more than a role player there. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, he's third on the depth chart, probably what, third, fourth? Like,
I,
is
I think the Texans are thinking of him in a way that most people have thought of Christian Kirk throughout his career. Hopefully, a dynamic, very dynamic number two.
yeah.
And in Jacksonville, he was asked to be more of that, really.
I'm going to be curious what those targets and that setup with CJ Stroud looks like, just because CJ Stroud has already shown that he has like a really good relationship with Nico Collins and Tank Dell, and even I mean Stephon Diggs started the flash later in the season. Robert Woods, John Mechie. I mean, these are there's a lot of freaking guys on that team that are all solid at the very least receivers. So it
I guess
doesn't bother me too much. It will be hilarious when he goes off for inevitably goes off for 7 catches, 158 yards, and 2 touchdowns in that first time that the
in
Jets.
Jacksonville, in
The
Jacksonville.
revenge game in Jacksonville will be hilarious when he is just torching, whoever's up on him. But
I think the reason why the Texans like him is you mentioned some of the guys, Tank Dell, Stephon Diggs. Tank Dell can't stay healthy. We've said that about
Yeah,
Christian Kirk the last 2 years. So that's kind of the wild card in all of this. A healthy Christian Kirk to go along with Nico Collins. Yeah, I can buy that.
right.
But that's where if you're the Jags and you looked at that big number that was coming this season, it didn't really line up. I'm sure, especially when you're going through a regime change. There's also schematic and conceptual
Yeah,
things to
absolutely.
take in. It's going to be a different football team, and to
Yeah,
me, it kind of says, you know, in some ways, we feel like we can lean on Trevor to elevate some new guys that we
yeah,
might bring in here with Brian Thomas Jr. But there's also the run game side of this that, you know what, we'd like to have those type of dynamic receivers, especially when they're healthy. But we're going to be a different offense in terms of physicality and trying to run the football. And in that way, help Trevor more so than even perhaps putting more weapons around him at the skill spots.
yeah. No, for sure. It does. It to me when I also saw all that news, like it did make me kind of think maybe they are fully committed to just like a longer term rebuild. Like they may not be trying to see how competitive this year is going to be. I mean, obviously, no matter what, this year is not going to be a final product by any means. But it does make me think. Okay, they might be thinking. Okay, we don't have to get it. Like all the pieces together right now. We're not as focused on that. But yeah, finances are critical too, and curious to see what they do to kind of replace these guys. I mean, obviously, we've talked about Brenton Strange with Evan Ingram kind of being, he's definitely going to be the number one tight end now. But at receiver, how are they going to address it? Because they have to add some dudes, whether they are investments for the future or immediate, support. They have to add some dudes. So that makes the draft a little bit more interesting. I don't think many people were talking about receiver a whole lot in the draft. Now I'm thinking maybe in the mid round somewhere they might, maybe even as high as third or second round, you could see it, depending on if they find the right match, the right guy. And also free agency. They might
Yeah.
be aggressive out the gate in free agency and go ahead and get somebody that, is proven, may not be, a star by any means, but somebody that can at least line up on the other side of Brian Thomas Jr. and make a play or two.
Yeah, it maybe it's a thought process that Parker Washington's ready to take
Yeah, that
another
too.
big step forward. But we're going to talk, and I agree. They're going to have to address receiver in some form or fashion.
Yeah.
It feels like they're probably, for better or worse, entwined with Gabe Davis maybe for this next season
Yeah.
based on his contract. So you would love for him to show some value in terms of the big numbers that you awarded him a year ago at this time. But you know, prioritize these three departures for me by position, maybe even more so than just the specific player. But it's hard not to tie the player into it. Prioritize wide receiver, tight end, and center now. As you think about free agency and then the draft and kind of the pecking order for need at those spots.
It's crazy. It's worst case scenario for the draft because I think center is actually probably the most important like
I agree.
position to address. Just because of the offensive line issues are have been so prevalent and they desperately need to fix that before like honestly, yeah, if you think Trevor can elevate receivers, if you think you've got a good running back duo, that's fantastic, but you got to be able to block and they haven't been able to do that. So for me personally, I think it's center and then I would probably go receiver behind that and then tight end,
Mm-hmm.
just because I actually am very optimistic about Brenton Strange. I liked a lot of what we were seeing. But center first, just because, we've already talked about it off podcast a bunch, but it doesn't seem like they could run with Fortner as the starter, even with his Cohen connections, all that stuff.
Yeah, you
But
were early on that. As soon as Liam Cohen was hired,
I was
you were
like,
talking
Fortner,
about
baby.
Luke
Yeah.
Fortner, big winner, and who knows?
Yeah,
Maybe
they might
Cohen
feel,
in this new personnel approach can see it with him. I guess the problem with Fortner for me was that when he was in there, it didn't feel like he was, subpar in terms of technique and understanding how to play the position. It seemed like physically,
yeah,
he
just
was
not there.
overmatched. And I don't know how much you can change that. at this level. Maybe he's made some changes physically. There is going to be a new strength and conditioning staff. Maybe they hold some type of secret with all that. But I'm with you on center, because especially when you talk about being able to run the football as
Yeah.
a big part of your identity.
No, I mean it's a massive issue already, and then now you really have to figure out like interior basically as quickly as possible. You've got, not a lot
Guard
of
to
time.
guard, really,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is like they have question marks all across that line, really. I mean, don't get me wrong, I guess tackle is pretty much set up. Who knows, they might have,
It's set
they
up on paper, but
on
to
paper,
your
but
point, how much are Harrison and Little really gonna, step
like in
forward? They
terms of
need to. They both do.
in terms of reliability, in terms of like how confident do you feel? It's like a 3 out of 10. Like I don't like feel that confident about that setup. Just because we really haven't seen Harrison definitely took a step back this past year. Little, continues to be solid, but the injury issues, all that different stuff. It's not in terms of confidence, it's not really there. But those are kind of the two positions, I guess, that you would expect those two guys to be the starters. Everything in between I feel like should be up for grabs. Like
Yeah.
honestly, like I think both guard spots and center. I personally don't mind seeing three new faces if that's what it comes down to. But the issue with that is that, you know, in the draft, especially, in the first and second round, taking a center or guard is not exactly high value type stuff. Interior linemen are not something
Not
that
fifth.
you
No.
want to, and that doesn't mean you couldn't nail a third round pick or a fourth round pick or something like that.
Yep.
We've seen Gladstone do that with the Rams, but simultaneously, it's like, okay, it feels like if you are going to address those positions, I feel like you got to go for more experienced players. But we've added experienced guards in the past. Brandon Scherf, I mean,
Ezra
and it didn't
Cleveland.
work out. So
Yeah.
it's I don't know how you fix it. It's gonna be very interesting to see how Gladstone
Yeah.
especially approaches that.
The Jags are interesting because when you look at some of the key spots on the roster, they shouldn't be picking fifth. They
Yeah,
they shouldn't have had the kind of season that would result in them picking fifth overall
yeah,
in the first round. But then when you kind of get into it, we're talking about the holes on offense. And I agree, in terms of value, it doesn't line up real well with a number 5 overall pick when you're thinking center guard. Like, you may really like Tyler Booker, the guard from
yeah.
Alabama, using him as an example, but are you really going to take him fifth overall? No.
No,
If you were 12th to 15th, somewhere in that range, okay, it's a more sensible alignment there with that position, and where you definitely still have a need guard to guard. But we talk about all these offensive sort of question marks, and you look at the mock drafts that continue to flood us, and you still see maybe a defensive lineman there in that
yeah,
fifth spot with Mason Graham. And understanding, again, we're about to go through the free agency phase. Trades are always a possibility when you're talking about the NFL draft. It just seems to be a little bit of across the board right now.
yeah. I mean, obviously, the fantasy I've already had, and I think probably I'm not on Twitter really at this point, but I'm imagining a bunch of Jaguars fans are talking about what if we traded for DK Metcalf? What if we got in there? It seems like he's going to the Patriots. It seems like that's already like almost a done deal. But who knows? Maybe he mired Gladstone's work while he's with Rams, when they had to play twice a year or something
Yeah.
like that. So yeah, I mean that is what's interesting about this is that as quickly as these departures have happened, just as quickly in this next week, a week from now, when we record the next episode, they might have 4 or 5
Yeah.
new guys.
So what's your anticipation? Do you think they're going to be very active in free agency, or, as you've talked about, it doesn't really line up with the way the Rams have done it,
Yeah,
to kind of go nuts in free agency? I think something you said earlier, I don't think James Gladstone, Tony Baselli, Liam Cohen look at the current situation as a rebuild.
right.
It's a pretty strong I would say, renovation.
Yeah,
Um, but you also get the sense with some of these moves that there's a bigger picture that's
yeah,
being taken into account. And that's understandable, because if we know something about the ownership and their approach, they've been more than patient with guys, with people in those roles of the general manager spot.
Yeah. I think I really do think that patience is going to be kind of the route that they go. If I had to pick one way or the other, I don't think that this is going to be a organizational setup that's going to rush into anything because honestly, if you did rush into stuff after what they've been, Gladstone's been in the building for less than a month. It's
Hmm.
like, I know they have like all, a supreme amount of knowledge whether they're in the Jaguars building or the Rams building or the Buccaneers building or whatever. But, you have to kind of, sell yourself to, especially in free agency. Like, and doing that, as like a brand new GM, in a brand new city, in a brand new situation, it's not easy to do.
It's
And so,
not, and
yeah,
I don't see them being. I mean, I could see them picking and choosing a little bit, but
yeah,
I don't see them being over the top active in terms of this upcoming run. Because really, when I look at what's out there right now, I'm not sure, and they're in a great space in terms of cap space. So if they wanted to take a flyer kind of on some folks, they could probably do that. I just don't get the sense they're going to be that type of participant in this upcoming stretch.
yeah. The number one name that comes to mind, and I think this is probably another one that Jags fans are talking about a bunch, is Chris Godwin. As a, obviously Cohen knows him well. And then on top of that, a veteran presence. If you're looking to get a guy with a little bit more experience, a guy who's fairly proven, probably has, best years probably behind him. He's just turned 29. But I mean, shoot, he's probably got a bit in the tank and he
Yeah.
knows that offense well. So you think of like maybe something like that, but I would if they do, I think in free agency it'll be like 4 or 5, maybe let's say 3 or 4 signings, and they'll probably be guys that will have a very significant role, but aren't necessarily going to be key building pieces or like the guys that you're thinking, okay, this is
Yeah.
why the team's going to be really good
I
or
don't
something like that.
I guess my thinking is I don't see them right out the gate,
Yeah, yeah,
locking guys down. I could see them taking an approach, well, let's see what type of interest a Chris Godwin
right.
truly attracts, and then we'll maybe wade into some situations once we get a feel. It goes back to the patience I think that you'll see exuded by Gladstone, who, by the way, I still say, and I know it's being perceived as this triumvirate, and I do think there is significant input from Liam Cohen. There is perhaps from Tony Baselli as well. But I think it's James Gladstone when it comes to personnel, that is going to be the guy that's going to make the call on most, if not all, of these
Yeah.
situations. So, Ev, so which are you kind of looking forward to the most? From a free agency perspective, are you just looking at this with sort of the inquisitive nature that, hey, we're going to get an idea of how this is really going to work under James Gladstone, like what we've talked about, the different scenarios. I guess we'll finally get to see what the actual approach looks like, unlike previous regimes where I think fans had gotten to the point where they'd seen enough.
Yeah. What's interesting about it is that obviously, we can only go off of the information we have from his time with the Rams and, in the NFL previously, which, we talked at length about lots of draft picks, generally having success in the mid round. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's not like he was the GM, right? He had a very, very important voice in that building, but wasn't the GM. We're going to see exactly what he, specifically wants to do. And that could be, beyond just general, like, hey, let's load up on draft picks and like, kind of shotgun spread it. Uh, so free agency will tell us a lot. If they do, in fact, if they kind of surprise us and they do, in fact, go aggressive and early in free agency, then the draft becomes a huge question mark. What
Yeah.
we thought was probably going to be, his modus operandi is now, kind of up in the air. Um, it's going to be interesting because we talked at length too about in terms of talent level in this draft. There's some pretty strong areas, and then there's some areas that are surprisingly weak compared to previous years.
Yeah.
Um, and so like, in terms of a trade back, we talked about, maybe they take Booker or whatever, they could trade back. That would actually work with okay, they can generate more draft picks. There's some simpatico there. There's some like synergy there. But at the same time, that's easier said than done. How many people actually are trying to get up to the fifth spot? Maybe somebody that wants a quarterback, but like I said, the quarterback talent this year compared to previous years isn't nearly as strong.
Yeah, the Jags are going to find out about the legitimate interest in Shadur Sanders, I think.
Yeah.
Because if somebody really likes that guy, they're going to want to probably get up to 5, if not
Yeah.
higher, to take him. May not need to. And then
Yeah.
there's the interesting aspect of what the Raiders have done here in the last 24
Yeah,
hours
that too.
in terms of impacting the quarterback position in this upcoming draft, with the Raiders acquiring Geno Smith from the Seattle Seahawks. So that would seem to eliminate that type of scenario in this draft. And, you know, it's a pretty elongated process. I just think that with Gladstone in there, the setup in general is going to be a lot different, including the draft process in terms of how they do their vetting of prospects, in terms of background and what they've taken away from these guys already at the Senior Bowl, or most recently, and probably more importantly, because Gladstone was there, Liam Cohen was there, Tony was there, the combine. So the dynamics of the whole operation, I would say, have shifted tremendously. It was Trent
Yeah.
Baalke and then the support. Now you've got a bit of a triumvirate. Although again, I think Gladstone, don't let that baby face kill you, fool you. Okay, don't let the boy band looks fool you. I think this is the guy that, when it's all said and done and it's draft night or it's free agency, he's going to be the one pulling the trigger.
Well, yeah, I think, if I, had it my way, and probably what they're trying to do is, when you think about exterior, when you think about, the bringing players in, sending them out, whatever, that's going to be all Gladstone. Interior, in the locker room, that's where we want Baselli, doing the most, because
In the building.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, like,
Yeah.
culture, right? Because that was,
Right.
when they moved on from Peterson and all that stuff, that was a huge talking point for the both of us was, okay, this is, fine and all, but we need culture, we need whatever. That's what I want Baselli doing.
Yeah.
I'm not disrespecting his ability to scout or to potentially put together a roster as well, but Gladstone is the guy who has a very proven track record of doing that.
Right.
So at the moment, until further notice, that's who I want handling, the personnel kind of technical decisions on it, and then Baselli handling, the intangibles, the emotion, the culture.
Yeah. Yeah. The day-to-day
Yeah.
operations there at the Miller Electric Center. Hey, Ev, anything else before we get out of here on a Saturday afternoon?
Just a correction. I kind of forgot that Stephon Diggs is also about to be a free agent.
Yeah.
So we're gonna get the double revenge game. Stephon Diggs to Jacksonville. Uh, you know,
Dueling
yeah, yeah,
revenge
yeah.
games.
Yeah.
I,
Well,
I I probably wouldn't be all that upset with Stephon Diggs.
I've always been a big fan. I've always really really liked him, like at the Vikings, at Maryland. I've always been a fan. I think it would be really fun. Might not actually make the team that much better or whatever, but I think the upside on if you're going to go for like a 30 plus receiver.
Potentially really good Twitter too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know.
I need to see Stephon Diggs' takes on Jacksonville. I needed to see him, say that I don't
Man, I
care
went
what.
to the Dreamette and I don't get it.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Like that would, oh my God, yeah. Like it would burn down the
Y'all
city.
really into
Uh
this soft serve stuff?
yeah, if he said that
And you got to pay
If
cash.
he
They
said
don't
that
take
Larry's was
cards.
mid, if he said Larry's was just okay,
I
or if
got
Angie
the
if he
brisket
said
at
Angie
Bono's and it
Subs
was
was just okay,
dry. Yeah.
that's the real because Angie's goes so hard. They've already, I don't know if you saw, but today they unveiled the Gladstone
Oh
sandwich.
yeah.
Uh
Yeah.
but no, that would be the ultimate, heater, because Angie's just goes so hard for the Jags that that would
We
be
gotta we gotta figure out something like that for here at Party Girl. We
yeah, I think so
gotta
too.
maybe we could honor one of the specialists. Because
Yeah,
kickers and punters are people too. And they're the only
Oh,
Pro Bowlers right now.
well,
So
yeah. Come on, give me the mastic sandwich. Give me the cook, whatever the
yeah,
cook is.
Logan Cook chicken salad.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, that's.
absolutely.
I'm sure they'd get in there. I'm sure they would
You have to
swing
get
by
Party Girl on that. Yeah, for
if y'all hit
sure.
them up. But
Absolutely.
no. Other than that, I think I'm good.
By the way, happy birthday to
Thank
Mr.
you,
Evan
thank you.
Reier right here. Probably should have done that off the top, but we didn't want to get him all, sort of
We're here for the
embarrassed.
Jags. You
This
know.
is about the Jags first.
Yes, absolutely.
But a happy
Uh,
29th to our guy right here. He made
yeah.
me a dad. He's made me a better dad in a lot of ways, and we're very proud of him. And I'll stop now before he
No,
does.
I am very grateful for y'all and grateful for all the birthday wishes I've gotten this year. It's been a very fun weekend so far, and hoping that the Jaguars can maybe give me a few belated gifts with some cool moves in free agency or what have you here in the
Yeah,
next week or two.
I think they're trying as we
Yeah.
speak. Well, that for Evan Reier, I'm Travis Reier. Thanking you once again for tuning in right here to No Sleep Teal on the Reier on YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed to Reier on YouTube, please hit that button right now, the subscribe button. Turn on those notifications. You'll get all of our content as it drops here on the channel. And a like, a thumbs up, always helps us out as well. Once again, for Ev, I'm Trav. Till next time, so long, everybody.
Cool. Oh,
Well, we're still rolling. I think we're about to, well,
I can do a music number.
hold on. Da, 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 da.
Hello, my baby. Hello, my darling.
Woohoo.
Hello, my right. Oh shit.